The race to operationalize AI continues to accelerate for all of us, I'd say, especially for those of us in industries that look like they're going to be most severely disrupted by AI. I think it's very much a race for survival for many folks. But research shows that most enterprises are discovering that breakthrough models, that high tech isn't enough. Cloudera's latest Data Readiness Index survey reveals a widening gap between the ambitions of people deploying AI and the reality of execution. And while organizations are investing heavily in agentic AI capabilities, many are still held back by some surprisingly fundamental challenges. Welcome to another episode of the AI Forecast, proudly sponsored by the amazing folks at Cloudera. I'm your host, Paul Muller. Join me along with leading companies and industry experts as we explore the past, the present, and the future of data and AI in the enterprise. Well, today we're joined by a previous guest and one of my favorite people. He is a literal rock star, Sergio Gago. Sergio is an entrepreneur, an investor. He's an academic teaching AI and big data while exploring the future impact of quantum computing, which is one of his personal passions. Speaking of which, he previously led AI and quantum computing at Moody's Analytics, where he helped shape generative AI strategy in financial services. And he is presently the CTO at Cloudera, leading innovation in AI, data, and advanced analytics. Welcome back to the podcast, Sergio.
Thank you very much, Paul. It's so great to be back here and continue our conversation, right? It's we could be talking for hours, but then all your listeners will switch off. But at least we divide in different episodes.
I don't know about that. You're always a lot of fun. Now, where are you joining us from today? Which part of the world are you in?
As you know, Cloudera takes me all over the world, meeting customers, analysts, vendors, partners, providers, you name it. But this very week, I happen to be home in Berlin, Germany, in one of the last days of winter here in this country. So looking forward for the spring of AI.
And we were talking before the show, we may have some glitches during the show because Berlin, despite being one of the most modern, forward-looking cities in the world, apparently has a bit of an internet problem when it rains. Is that right?
It is. It is one of the cities with the least amount of deployed optic fiber deployed in the city, which is quite interesting, right? When you think about the deployment of copper lines and coaxial cables and all those things, as it happens, many of the European countries or countries that were, let's say, less developed or with a smaller economy than Germany before, today have full optic fiber, amazing deployments, Starlink, you name it, right? But as we were talking before starting the show, how important bandwidth is.
It certainly is.
Heavily rely on having continuous 5G on your phone, having a proper broadband at home, but either when you work remote or when you're moving petabytes of data from one data center to the cloud or vice versa. But we just give it for granted.
Yeah, it's so true. And I mentioned foundations at the beginning of the show, and we're going to talk about the foundations of AI. But I mean, if you can't move data around reliably, it's easy to forget how inconsistent some of these technologies are across the planet. But hey, I know you are in Berlin and you've got a big day ahead of you while I'm just finishing mine up here in Australia. You're a past guest, as I mentioned, so we'll skip the lightning round this time, and let's get into the meat of the findings of the most recent Data Readiness Index and the survey that you conducted. One of the things that sort of jumped out as we talked about this at the beginning of the show is this gap between ambition and execution. You were nodding as we opened. Does that sound familiar to you, and why do you think that gap exists?
100%. And Paul, this was our hypothesis when we started, and the survey indeed confirmed our suspicion. We asked about 1,200 IT professionals, from CIOs to heads of data, CDOs, you name it. What are the main challenges that hinder you on your AI deployment process? Or at the very least, what stops you from extracting ROI from AI? And we have seen examples from that famous Stanford study, the MIT study, that have been saying no AI agent use case produces ROI. And then Stanford saying, no, it's the other way around. It's just that your sample was not correct. All in all, what the world was seeing was a lot of noise and not very clear examples of, all right, what are the ones who make it, what are they doing? And the ones who don't make it, what are they failing? So we wanted to extract some signal from that, and especially at the enterprise level in large organizations or public institutions. As it happens, and we saw that in the survey, there is indeed a gap from the experimentation phase at the innovation level all the way to the deployment in production of such use cases. Whether it is with a simple chatbot based on an LLM, all the way to AI agents that help us run any business process inside the organization. And lo and behold, what happens in there, what hinders us, is not access to the model itself. In fact, models are starting to coalesce or even to get commoditized. But how do these models get true access to all the data that is at their disposal, at the disposal of any human inside the organization? And that is one of the main issues that companies are facing, and it's all about the platform that they run.
Okay, well, let's talk a bit about that, because I did see data quality popped up as one of the issues. But hey, before we get into maybe some of the specific findings, I want to take a moment to get a little bit of empathy, for want of a better phrase, because you have been in the position of many of the survey respondents, both as a founder, as somebody who's kind of what I'd call it that early stage, you called it experimentation phase, right? You've got a hypothesis about product market fit, you're innovating, and also your time at Moody's, right? Like a really big, serious, highly regulated company that you know can't be messing about, and you have to get to production, show shareholder returns. What's the biggest shift in how you think about AI and getting it to real world, getting it beyond that pilot mode?
One of the biggest issues is, as you were mentioning, trusting the data. What we're trying to do is in these AI agents to improve, be our Gemini crickets, or be our supporters in doing specific tasks. That means taking over us in some cases, automating ourselves, almost like getting bionic ourselves to be able to do more and deeper. But in order to do that, you have to fully trust these systems. And I really like the model that for a long time we've used with robotics, where a robot can be supportive or can be a replacement. Let me put it this way. If you bring a robot, maybe a car or even a robot in a warehouse, the robot can first act as your backup. If by any chance you faint or you don't have enough strength to carry a box, the robot can help you lift that box. The second stage is where the robot does most of the work, but you help the robot, you guide it. It's almost like you're with a joystick guiding it. Those are the cases where the robot is supporting us. That's phase one of agentic AI. We've done that. Most companies are in there, but not necessarily with the data. And that's okay, because the human is in the loop. The human is driving the effect and the value. So as long as there is a final human behind evaluating everything, then we're good. The next phase is when the robot takes over, or when the agent takes over. And we see this in coding agents today. Many software developers, and our company in Cloudera, most of us are essentially letting the agents code, and we are the ones designing, architecting, reviewing, but the one driving is really the coding agent, whether it's Cloud Code or GitHub Copilot or Codex, you name it. In these cases, the robot is doing the heavy lifting, and you're just on the side, making sure that it's steering in the right direction, right? What happens is in the next phase is, well, the robot is doing all the work, we're just there as a backup, the opposite of what happened before. And finally, the last step is the robot fully taking over the whole process. We're not there yet. Almost no company is in that state. But we've seen how token consumption in the last pretty much 12 months has exploded exponentially. Even in the last time we spoke here in the podcast, that has been growing by orders of magnitude. So there's no forecast or no crystal ball.
Look, I know for my own vibe coding session that I was like literally like running out of tokens. I'm like just having to put more tokens in the machine. It was because you can burn through them so quickly.
Yesterday, I had to wake up in the middle of the night because that was when my round of tokens rebooted. I was like, okay, I have more tokens now. I consume my colleagues and my cloud card, so I had to go into the next round. It's compiling.
Yes, exactly. I feel your pain. I went through exactly that. Just as I was nearing the end of a session, I was like, computer says, no, you've run out of tokens.
Just give me a few more. But
exactly. It's like a drug.
We have an army of developers at our service. We joke with some friends of mine who are also CTOs that when you become a chief technology officer, your green squares on GitHub, they go silent. Right? If you come, you were green, and suddenly you become a manager, a senior manager, a director, and at some point there are months and over months that there is not a single commit. Maybe you have a random side project that you do on a weekend. This is especially true if you have family and stuff like that. And suddenly all of us are becoming like all completely green on GitHub, and that's our agents at our service, doing all these things that we always wanted to do, but we never had the time, right? So that is an example of agents and robots essentially taking over. And we are the ones directing and evaluating. Now, back into your original question, as we use this framework, what enterprises need in order to get into that mature automation phase for the agents? Mm-hmm. Let me use the financial institution example. If I am in a bank, for example, and I'm writing a credit report, as a human, I have certain amount of accesses inside my organization. I can access my CRM, I can access my libraries, I can access a repository of information, all the different knowledge bases. And traditionally, IT teams have been really good at telling me what can I access and what I cannot access. As if I am this credit analyst, I can probably access a lot of historical information about my clients, about the loans of my bank, and so on. But I cannot access my HR files with payrolls from every single of my colleagues. We've become really good at doing these type of things, and with our access card, we can access some floors and not access some other floors. Our agents need to have something similar. If anything, more accurate and more mature than what we humans do at two levels. What do we mean by two levels? An agent needs to know what they can access by design or how they've been created, but also who is using them and what information can be provided to that person. I'll give you an example. Mm-hmm. The CEO of a given company will probably have access to all the information of the organization. That does not mean that it is going to be willing or able to share that information with every employee in the organization or every person. So
that's what you're saying.
We need to look at governance at two different levels: how we build the system and who is the person using that system. When you combine these things together, suddenly your retrieval augmented generation experiment that looks fantastic, looks phenomenal, and can save countless hours doesn't cut it anymore for a production deployment, because all you did was get 10,000 PDF files, drop them in a vector database, create a nice chatbot with any other UI or look and feel that you want, and yes, this person in the bank is generating a credit report that looks fantastic. But that is not going to cut it in a well-governed, in a compliant industry where you need to access 25 or 100 different systems that are continuously changing, continuously evolving. So if you're a small startup and all your data is in a single database, in a single vendor, okay, maybe that's fine. But any organization, medium or large, is going to have a series of SaaS providers from ServiceNow, Salesforce, HubSpot, you name it, right? They're going to have a series of internal systems that manages their personal or their information or their data, whether it's Confluence or Workday or SAP, all these elements. They will have databases with information for that. Let's say they're building a customer support agent. They will have a Salesforce customer support or Zendesk or Soho or any of these systems. Any given customer support agent, the human would have access to a developer or an engineer to ask them a question. Hey, I have this customer, he's struggling with this thing, I cannot find any issue, can you guide me? And they will find something together. How do you mimic that relationship? Well, you can give this agent access to the code and say, oh, there was a developer 5 months and a half ago that created this line of code that could have caused a regression. So maybe that's the issue that's creating a problem to this customer that's using this version of the software, and making that inference, mental inference, not LLM inference, that the connection is, hey, this is the problem. But the agent needs to have access to GitHub, Salesforce, Jira, Confluence, a SQL Server database that you have in the office that no one has physically touched in 15 years, and so on and so forth. And that is what we found in the survey, in the index, that companies are lacking. A, full access to the whole data state that humans we typically have that access. And two, the trust that this data can be used for these specific purposes in a well-governed and secure way. We summarize it into data preparation or data preparedness for AI. We know that LLMs are great at unstructured data. What about structured data? That's where we need also systems that are good at analyzing time series information, analyzing financial statements and other elements that are more mathematical and less temperature based as our LLMs. And it has been quite interesting to see how the report and how this 1,200 people are all coalescing in the same idea. Experiments are great, but I'm not sure if I can still trust the data and the platform and the full access across my data states.
So one of the topics that came up, so you asked the question, or you referred to the MIT study that talked about the missing ROI of AI. And when you conducted the data readiness index, one of the things that popped out as the biggest inhibitor for ROI was data quality. And I have to say I'm surprised and not surprised at the same time. I'm not surprised because poor quality data would give you a poor ROI. I'm surprised that we still, and it comes up on the show when I talk to guests over the last 2 years, data quality is one of the things that they say is the secret sauce to getting this right. Why are we still struggling with a problem we all acknowledge is a problem?
I think AI has been the perfect catalyzer for this, because before AI, we used data for three main purposes. One was to create business intelligence dashboards, essentially look into the past. And then we humans would make inferences or decisions on forecasts and whatnot. Two was about machine learning. So how do we create systems that are able to look into the future? And three was to ideally make business decisions manually or automatically that use the former two in order to modify our original data, what we call in some cases reverse ETL and stuff like that. Almost like, hey, if I can see all the information about my sales and I can create a model, then I can update my user information so that I can label them as propensity to buy, for example. Now, many companies were completely data unprepared. The reality is that the vast majority of enterprises and industries out there don't have any data preparation, essentially because they didn't think they would need it. If you are a factory out there, maybe a medium-sized factory, maybe you have those robots which are IoT capable and creating a lot of telemetry, but all you cared about was making sure that you produce the throughput of this specific piece that then you sell to an automotive larger car manufacturer. And you're employing 5,000 people, and you're a multi-million or even a billion-sized dollar company of turnover that could benefit greatly from this. But you never looked into that, even though you had plenty of use cases. When is this machine going to break? Right, typical machine learning use case in manufacturing.
And I might jump in with one of my personal experiences. Is the other thing is often if there's a data quality issue, the person who is closest to that data knows what the quality issues are and can, to your point, they heuristically remove them without actually removing them from the data themselves. They kind of look at it and go, oh, that's an outlier, ignore that. The machine always does that, or the accounting guys always get this one wrong. Whereas when you're feeding it to an AI, of course, it has none of that context, so it has to take as it is. So I suppose part of the problem with data quality sometimes is familiarity of the people closest to it.
That's exactly right. So we look at this in a reverse familiarity, I would say. Companies now that need to leverage data in order to create AI systems, the first thing they need to do is create data awareness in their teams. Essentially massive amounts of training. And I'm not just talking about learning how to use your LLM or how to become a prompt engineer. What I'm talking about is how do you become data-driven, data-first person, regardless of your position in the organization. Most likely, this person who knows and works in this machine will have these anti-bias systems in place because this person has been using this forever. It's almost the radiologist that is able to identify the false positives from their Watson element, right? We
perfectly put
on these things, but we also want to get back that information to keep improving, fine-tuning, and supporting the system. So that is step number one on data quality. It starts with people. Starts and ends with people. The second element is understanding what is your data state. Most companies don't have a proper single centralized catalog or meta catalog of their data. That means that you don't have any inventory of what you have, in what format and shape, how accessible it is, how often does it change, and so on. So if you don't have that, maybe because you're a very federated company, then not only you're incurring on many, many additional costs because you're duplicating, triplicating, multiplying by many times your data cost on platforms. Some companies will have the same information in 3 or 4 different data platforms, SaaS or otherwise. So you need to have a proper catalog to run that. That starts with discovery and lineage. So that is why in Cloudera we acquired, it's going to be a year and a half ago, Octopai. So that you need to start with absolute data lineage that tells you, hey, this machine learning model is telling you what the sales forecast is going to be for these retail shops in this geographical region. All right, where does that come from? From this model that has this benchmark. Which data has been used to train this model? This query that got the data prepared from this ETL, that got the data prepared from another ETL, that put everything on this bronze, your typical medallion data architecture, right? Bronze, silver, gold, that comes from this, that eventually comes from all the receipts that someone is scanning with a camera on the stores. And then suddenly you realize, oh, we were using cameras that had, the definition was so low that oftentimes the numbers were mixed up and our OCR was the source of the data quality problems. So you use Lineage to evaluate and to know these things. When there was a human, the human knew, oh, our OCR system has been always terrible, so we never trusted the dashboards that told us data about forecast. We only looked at the final bill on the cashier. But only a human knew that. You start automating things, the agent doesn't have that context, and suddenly the company starts making the wrong decisions because of lacking that lineage. And the third element on data quality is that quality is often distributed, or the data is distributed so that the quality needs to have all the different data points. Let me give you an example on this. You can look, following the same retail example, you can look at sales per shop coming from the receipt or coming from a P&L. Oftentimes, those two numbers are not going to consolidate. Why? Because they're prepared, they're created with two different systems in place, with two different teams that don't talk with each other and have different sources of information. Now, the humans would get together and would discuss and will say, hey, this is the discrepancy. We're going to use your data. We're going to use my data. Or more often than not, I will keep using my data for my own reporting and you do what you do for your reporting. Companies have silos. I'm not discovering the new world with this. This is obvious. But humans can, when we want, navigate through those silos. Right? We see that when there are merger and acquisitions. Two companies get together, one comes with this massive data state on one of the hyperscalers with one SaaS, another company comes with another one. So any data platform system or platform in general that you use needs to be able to consolidate all your data states, regardless of where they are, regardless of what the provider is. That's the only way to achieve data quality, which, back into the original question, is the second thing that's hindering most of the ROI use cases. And when it goes into production, the data is all over the place because no one looked that the original data doesn't cut it.
Before we get on to another phrase you used, I want to talk about governance in a second because you brought that up. You have a background as a CTO in a place like Moody's, obviously a very data-centric organization. However, a lot of the things you're talking about, training people, building data lineage systems, spending time on quality, all of those things sound slow and expensive and not as much fun as talking about AI models. How do you make the case at the boardroom that this is something that we really can't afford to skip at the moment?
I think we just need to look at all the problems that companies trying to skip are having. And those companies that are not doing their respective homework. Now, of course, and I'm going to be selfish here for a little bit. Typically, companies look at this and say, hey, this is going to take years to evaluate. And if you have to do your data homework, then it may take you a few months to get more data ready for your AI if you had never done anything before. But what we see is that those companies that already had a proper data strategy, because they were heavy implementators of machine learning algorithms, for example, they have everything ready. The difference is, where do we start? Do we start from an innovation team that builds experiments and creates wow factor and shows the path? Or do we start from where the data pipelines actually are? Don't get me wrong, we need the innovation teams, we need someone to show us the way. But once the companies are putting together heavy investment, and that's the other thing that we're seeing on the survey, that 100%, every single respondent is going to continue investing on their AI capabilities. It's really, really important to think of it beyond, hey, I need to buy GPUs.
I want to ask another question before we get on to governance, and that's one of technology and architecture, something we've talked a bit about on the show before. I'm a big believer that architecture doesn't get the respect that it deserves, especially in these conversations. And I'm going to simplify to make a point, but one of the big architectural pivots at the moment, obviously you had people talking about microservices and so forth, but really it's been on-prem versus off-prem. And it felt like very much an either or. And if you were in the on-prem camp, it was almost like you were battling with the off-prem guys and vice versa. How important is, look, again, I'm talking to a CTO here, how important is getting the architecture right and moving beyond this discussion of it's got to be one or the other? What are your thoughts on this?
For a long time, we thought that the cloud was going to be everything, and that we would all lift and then shift. But the reality is, you know where I'm going, right?
Yeah.
We never shifted, and our costs grew exponentially, and then we wanted to change from one hyperscaler to the other. but then we go and merge with another company that comes with a complete different architectural level, and then we have a heart attack trying to integrate those two things together. I think the reality is that every single organization will need to live in a hybrid mode. Until now, we were what I call today a hybrid by accident. But you wanted to be fully on the cloud with one provider, and then you hired all your sysadmins, all your DevOps were specialists in that one provider with all the certifications, and you created a platform engineering team, and you tried to do everything, and you told every single person who writes code or data, any new thing that you create needs to be on this platform that is on AWS, on GCP, on Azure. And off you went. You paid a lot of money to a head of engineering, a head of architecture, or something like that, and thought you solved the world. But lo and behold, and we see this left and right in many of our customers in Cloudera, large banks, large insurance companies, healthcare, any company that is either very or slightly regulated. There's always use cases on the data center that can't be moved, period. And then you buy another company and comes with a massive data estate in Snowflake, for example, and with a SaaS provider that has absolutely critical information that needs to be integrated. So this becomes hybrid by accident. What happens is that these companies that went on 5 years ago, 6 years ago, on this crusade of everything needs to be on the cloud, now they do not have the capabilities to even open the door to a data center. Most of the sysadmins that you may hire today have never set foot on a data center before. Not that it was my cup of tea, putting on, your code and going into these cold environments and putting blades and disks, but still, even if we go beyond the cost element that is extremely relevant in AI, the total cost of ownership of AI inference on the data center is orders of magnitude cheaper, especially after a certain threshold, than in the cloud. But also sovereignty. We see this in Europe, we see this in Latin America, in the Middle East, in Asia. More and more there are use cases or data that cannot leave your own borders. You either use a specific cloud provider, a neo cloud, or a sovereign cloud provider, but you need to be fully independent from external forces or external powers. This is at the data center level, at the hyperscaler level, at the model provider level. So the full stack of anything that you need in order to do AI. So you need to move from hybrid by accident towards hybrid by design. And this is what we call at Cloudera the era of convergence, right? The cloud is here to stay, don't get me wrong. The convenience of the cloud, the one click and I have 100 instances with GPUs at my service to do my bidding and then switch them all off. That's fantastic. But you need to design your systems in a way that you can move all that compute or all that storage with one click from AWS to GCP to your data center and back. And that with one click, you can connect to any element on your data state that you have, from your data workloads to your Informatica ETLs, to your SQL servers in the middle of some random office that you just acquired. And that's something that requires specific architecture and specific needs. Now, you can do this either by getting a massive integration tax of having dozens of vendors, each of them specialized on their own environment and their own software, or you can work on that at the orchestration level. And we're back into the data quality and data confidence and trust and accessibility. Rather than going back to the old days of convenience of data hoarding, bring all the data to me, and only then you will be able to shift. You will be able to leverage everything. That's never going to happen. It's a nice dream, but you will never have, as a large organization, all your data in a single provider, SaaS or not, in a single cloud. Because the world evolves. And today, faster than any other time before. If we were not able to do that 5 years ago, we're definitely not going to be able to do that today. We're all your engineers are building agentic applications, spinning up Supabase accounts and Databricks accounts and Pinecone accounts and shadow IT left and right. So rather than hampering innovation, not delivering AI systems or creating a massive chaos across, why don't you build a system that helps you orchestrate and have an umbrella, essentially what we call data fabric, have an umbrella that helps you orchestrate and control all those elements. That's what we've traditionally said or talked about, bringing the era of control of the old data center and Hadoop bases with the era of convenience of the cloud and merging that into the era of convergence.
All right, let's talk about governance. So you mentioned governance earlier, and it's one of those topics, again, we've covered on the show a couple of times, where there's that tension between governance being seen as being a necessary evil sometimes, as being an enabler by some people, as being an important guardrail, and others who look at it as something that slows down innovation. So I guess my question is, how do you get the right guardrails without slowing things down? And obviously you've got a background in regulated industries. How do we tie that into the conversation about data readiness?
This is actually pretty interesting to see how the balance tilts. If we look at the survey, public institutions or highly regulated industries are the ones that have typically better governance on their data, but where accessibility drops massively. So it's almost like a trade-off. You govern your data well, but then you don't build things, or you have ungoverned systems and then you go crazy on the things that you build. In fact, only 18% of the respondents say that they have or that they claim to have proper governance systems across their data. The flip side of this is the accessibility roadblocks. Essentially, and this is really, really relevant for agents, back into the beginning of the conversation. How do agents access the data, right? So most companies, most respondents in the survey say that they don't have the right accessibility to their models, to the data for their models, either because of data silos or because of not having the right governance. What happens traditionally in regulated industries or public institutions is that if you don't have the right governance framework, then you have a closed door by default. Once you set up the framework is when data becomes open, because you can put the right rules. For example, are you redacting PII from your information? We have a fantastic use case with a healthcare public institution in Europe, where they are able to share data, fully anonymized, synthetic data, in a way that is governed in a fantastic way, and then leverage those use cases for researchers and scientists. So they've been able to find that specific lever to be able to govern the data and then make it accessible in a sort of data mart available for the people who are able to sign for it. We see the same thing on the financial industry. Typically, you should not even look at what your colleague is doing, but are there any ways in your platform that helps your colleague or your colleague agent do their job by leveraging what you're doing, not reinventing the wheel? So we typically throw the word governance as if it is remember Dilbert, Murdoch, the cybersecurity and governance evil person that would not let you take a step without
the Department of No. Yeah.
Department of No, indeed. God bless Scott Adams. I learned so much from him. So it is seldom like that. On one hand, compliance, governance people, cybersecurity teams, they're there to help. But they sometimes did not have the right tools to add this governance in a way that they can open things with the right control. That for me is the problem of not starting with the governance. If you start your Gen AI experiments in the lab without bringing these people in, if you have those governance elements as an afterthought, they are never going to make it. because these systems need to be built by default at the lineage level, at the policies and accessibility level, at the data quality level, benchmarks, you name it. Now, only if we had systems in data that could do that. Oh, wait, we did that for a long time in the machine learning world and in the business intelligence world. When we were creating business intelligence dashboards, we had all this governance already. We had to create a dashboard for the CEO, a dashboard for...
That's true. I hadn't thought about that. You're right.
We've been able to create machine learning algorithms that have access to the right data for training, or that had synthetic data for, 15 years now. It seems that data platforms, we created that maturity, that level of maturity many, many years ago. So the only thing we need to do is, when we create the AI systems, embed them in our data pipelines. Think about AI agents or Gen AI use cases as the last leg of your normal data pipeline, your normal data flow. And then suddenly data governance becomes a breeze. It's only one additional step where you say, this data set is fully public. Any public model, GPT under Azure, can use it in any data center, no problem. This other data set is sensible to GDPR, and it needs to live in my data center in Germany. And only these specific people within the organization can access it. Now, the big difference is that when we created a business intelligence dashboard, we only thought about the consumer of the data, the consumer of the dashboard, which was essentially the goal, right? There would be a business analyst creating the dashboard, and then the CEO or a line manager consuming that with the information they are supposed to read, or a customer. With the agent, we need to do the next twist on our governance system, because there is two stakeholders. One stakeholder is, like before, who's the person consuming the system? Who's the person asking questions to the agent? And the agent will have access to a variety of information. The second one is what the agent is, and what can the agent do or access to create the data or the information for the end user. Let me try to explain it in different words. Oftentimes, you need to have specific knowledge in order to create an answer to someone, even if that original knowledge cannot be disclosed to that person.
Like a lawyer.
Exactly. So the agent uses exactly the same factor, needs to access a big superset of information in order to reason and to infer what the question is, but then needs to check what the answer is to the final user to say, hey, you can access only a subset of my superset, but that doesn't mean that I cannot use my superset in order to reason across all that information. And that's a very, very relevant point. I'll give you one simple example. Someone asks a CEO on a town hall, are we going to pay end of year bonuses this year, considering how good the company has performed in the stock market? So the CEO needs to know, hey, I am on a town hall environment. My answer is public. It may go outside of the company. In order to answer, I need to have information that is material. So I cannot disclose it. I need to take in consideration that this is related to bonus and compensation and stuff like that. So the CEO has this much information, uses all that, not only about the company, but also his own or her own seniority and expertise on communication, right? That is baked in his own model, in his brain or her brain. And then all that gets condensed into the answer to the employee in the town hall. Well, the bonuses are going to be reflecting the overall performance of the market and some other LinkedIn style gibberish that says nothing. Governance.
I like the way you describe that. Some gibberish that says nothing. In all seriousness, it sounds like we've got a lot of groundwork to do from an agentic standpoint. How much can a platform, and I'll use Cloudera as an example because you're obviously really close to it. How much can a platform enable that agentic system to be able to make better decisions about how and what it can work with and disclose?
I think it is fundamental. And this is one of the main reasons why I joined Cloudera about a year ago, because it was the right substrate for AI to really uncover all those issues, from the integration tags or what other enterprises decide to do, which is self-manage, build everything yourself. When you try to put all these variables in place, true governance, lineage and accessibility, hybrid by accident or by design, put on all that together and supporting innovation at the speed that the world requires today, there's only two options. Either you build a massive data team and engineering team together to try to reinvent the wheel, or go with one platform like Cloudera's that is thinking about the governance gap, the accessibility roadblocks, and the integration issues. Essentially, what these CIOs and CTOs in our report are saying, these are the things that are slowing the ROI or extracting ROI from these use cases. And I got the board breathing under my neck, behind my neck, and saying, what are you doing? What are you doing? I gave you a lot of money. You spent on it on tokens and on GPUs, but there's nothing. All you got was a bunch of beautiful experiments, but either they're in production and didn't do anything, because by the time they were in production, you had to limit them so much that your agents couldn't provide anything really useful. And we saw that 2 years ago. There were examples of a few companies that fully automated their customer support teams. Some of them went as far as laying off their whole customer support teams. And the vast majority of them, guess what? They rehired many of these people because they realized, oh, there was something missing in there. And these are the ones saying, yeah, governance, accessibility, integration cost, and the true governance of these systems.
I've got a copy of the report. It's been really interesting reading. As I say, it's both surprising and not surprising that it's the foundational stuff that is so important. And obviously, to your point, the data estate, the compute estate, the connectivity fabric is so different now, even to what it was 24 months ago. It does require an approach that's much more flexible. So I suppose we shouldn't be surprised people are struggling with this stuff, because the problem itself is fundamentally more complicated than it has been for ever, really, let's be honest. And the stakes are really high, because obviously if you get this stuff wrong, you could, to your point, you could jeopardize the company, you could make the right decision, but based on the wrong data. It's definitely an interesting time.
So in Cloudera.com, you can access the report and put your details and download it. On our LinkedIn, you can find on Cloudera on LinkedIn, you can find the report as well. Really easy to get. Pretty interesting insights. And as you're saying, if you don't do it, if you do it but you do it wrong, you can jeopardize your company. If you don't do it, you're going to lose massive competitive advantage by a startup that builds and replaces you, SaaS apocalypse style, or by your competitor that is being agentic as we speak. So hopefully on that report, you can find some insights on what are the main challenges. On why our posture is, look at the fundamentals and first principles of data, and then evaluate what's the best choice for you to do hybrid by design and not by accident.
I'm taking that phrase with me. I love it. That's brilliant. Sergio, as always, it's just been an absolute blast catching up with you. It's so true. If you think about OpenClaw and what it's done to the world of big data and agentic AI. It's incredible. But actually, it was going to be one of the topics I wanted to sort of talk to you about to a degree is we're seeing people OpenClaw's become kind of this hotbed of innovation by itself. I was having a conversation with a developer friend of mine, and he's built a solution, but he's decided to sandbox all of his data and effectively air gap his OpenClaw system because he's so concerned about what it could do if it's connected to raw data. Is this the sort of thinking? Is that going to lead to more silos as people start to go, the solution is we need to air gap the system? Or
that is exactly what we're talking about, what we refer when we talk about the silos. So OpenClaw is a magnificent tool that is showing us what the true world of independent agents can do. However, we know that it's incredibly insecure and that its hallucinations can lead to problems. For example, OpenClaw deleting all your emails. What happens is you can get OpenClaw to access in an unfettered, free way of accessing your Gmail, your calendar, your Outlook, all your systems, right? It can access everything, but it's not governed. So what happens is, to me and to many other people and to your friend, we don't trust it. So we air gap it. But what happens when you have an air gapped OpenClaw? It ain't very useful, isn't it? So this is exactly what happens in all the cases that we've been talking about today. When you cannot trust the system, when you don't have a proper governance layer, a proper data fabric, even if there's an access, because an access is an API, an MCP server, that's easy to develop. But if you don't have it well governed, your systems are going to be completely locked in from those systems. And a system that's an agent that's not open to the original data, it's going to be a completely useless ball of hallucinations. So OpenClaw is the great example of how can we add a governance layer around it. And NVIDIA has been working on that. And I know there's many groups and many people forking and branching the system. But unless there is full data access, full data control, observability, Lineage, fabric in general around OpenClaw or any other agentic system, the only true way to deploy it is going to be on an air-gapped, useless environment.
So how familiar are you with the work of, say, Patrick Dubois, Gene Kim, Jez Humble, that whole DevOps world, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So Gene Kim specifically highlighted the parallel between software development and the theory of constraints for manufacturing, right? Going back to Eli Goldratt's work.
I will the goal made for DevOps.
Yeah. So, when Gene and I were talking about that back when the book was still being in draft stage, his sort of central thesis was, or hypothesis was, the big constraint for software developers was effectively cycle time, iterative time, right? I would argue now that constraint almost has completely been blown away by vibe coding. Yeah, you can code now faster than you can think, really.
Yeah.
The constraint, I would argue, then now has moved from software development and the speed with which we can ideate to the speed with which we can take those ideas and connect them to data that we can trust, data that's useful.
So I'm super happy that you bring that up. The theory of constraints has been since I read Goldratt for the first time, my sort of my mental model for business decision making and essentially everything. Yeah, you're absolutely right. We just removed the slowest link, which was the actual coding, and we moved it into the next one, which is the creation of usable software. So essentially, all software developers are becoming architects that have an army of developers. What is the constraint in most companies, including Cloudera today? Reviewing the pull request from the agents. In fact, the open source world is at risk today because most open source programs, most open source components are being flooded by pull requests coming from agents. And the community does not have time to review all that and integrate or even decide strategically where should the project go. And then these open source communities are thinking, all right, what do we do? Some of them are banning agents from submitting.
I saw that. Yeah.
Some others are being a bit more open, but asking the human to review beforehand, the human owning that agent. So, and there's a really nice study out there that was released a few weeks ago about the effect during 2025, the effect of AI agents on open source. Which libraries are being used and which ones are not. We call it the Tailwind CSS effect. Tailwind is this company, right, that created CSS frameworks but their business model was around documentation and support on their website. And now they have orders of magnitude more downloads, but absolutely no one goes to their website. So the company had to downsize massively, even though their system is more famous than ever.
Yeah.
And use
It's
more.
fascinating.
So clearly the constraint has moved towards the higher level design of the system.
And I'm going to argue, I'll submit again, I don't discount that, and I think you're right, but I actually think there's a parallel one emerging about data, because again, if you think to yourself, I can ideate all this stuff and build a new app, but if I can't connect the app to the data that's going to drive that, well, that's just the whole, back to, I guess, some of the findings in the data readiness index, is that's just completely stalled my project, because I've had a great idea, but now it's just sitting there and it's got no data to feed on.
Exactly.
And so suddenly, it's just a thought. As I say, it's just more of a thought bubble. Are we going to be having, when are we going to be writing the Phoenix project for data?
Okay, is that a challenge?
I love it. Thank you so much. If people want to have a look at your own work, you've got a website as well, I think, where you have some of your musings on being a CTO.
The PirateCTO.com, that's where I talked about that, about my book on the CTO toolbox, about guitar, quantum computing, or even thoughts about DevOps and the data revolution and what's to come. So everyone's welcome to add me on LinkedIn as well, and follow my musings on data, music, quantum, or anything else. Thank you, Paul.
Musings on music. I love it. Thank you so much. Thank you all for joining us for today's episode and making it this far. If you've got any questions or comments about today's episode, we'd love to hear from you. So you can drop a line in the comment section, or you can hit up Cloudera on LinkedIn using the handle @Cloudera. As always, we've got a tremendous array of guests coming up. So if you do like what you've heard today, and we really do hope you do, make sure to like, share, and subscribe so that you don't miss a drop, and people who you think could get value out of it can get some exposure to this podcast. Thanks again to Cloudera for bringing us another episode of the AI Forecast, and thanks again for listening in. We will see you all, or you'll see me, next week.
Thank you.